I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. I believe the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the one right that's listed in the Constitution that uses that very specific affirmative language, shall not be infringed.
It's also the one right that uses the phrase well-regulated.
Correct, when it's talking about the militia and the state.
By the way, just for clarity's sake, I'm not against the Second Amendment. I don't want to ban guns. But you're saying more guns makes us more safe.
Yes.
So when we got 400 million guns in the country, we had an increase and gun deaths went up. So when exactly does this curve hit that takes it down? Would 1 billion guns do it?
Let's just run those numbers, 400 million, 50,000. You're talking about less than a fraction of not even 1%, of 100th of a percent.
But it goes up, not down. So your argument is backwards.
But if you want, okay, so let's come up with a solution. Okay, so one of the issues, a contributing factor, again, I believe it's the individual that is the problem.
So your solution to that is give them more guns.
So I'm saying that because people are the problem, we need to look at the problems that those people are facing and how do we address it.
But you've removed the ability for the state to do that.
No, because you're...
If you don't have background checks and you don't have registration and permitting, how do you know who has a problem in terms of the people who you're giving a gun to?
Do you want to talk about the background checks first, or do you want to talk about solutions first?
I want to talk about what you're doing is you're bringing chaos to order.
That's your subjective opinion, that it's bringing chaos to order.
It's not my subjective opinion. We have 50,000 gun-related deaths. That's not a subjective opinion.
Okay, so...
That's dead people. You want to say, I'm a Second Amendment purist, and I'm making it safer. You're not. You're making it more chaotic. And that's not a matter of opinion. That's the truth.
That is a matter of opinion, John.
But why take away their tools?
Because certain of their tools that they're using would be infringements upon the people's right to keep and bear arms, upon their constitutional rights, upon due process, upon other things.
That registering is an infringement?
Yes.
Okay. Is voting a right?
It's a right for citizens, yes.
Do you have to do anything to do it?
Yes.
What do you have to do?
It depends on the state.
What do you have to do?
Sometimes you have to be at least 18 years old.
What do you have to do?
And in some places you have to have a government-issued ID.
What do you have to? You have to
be on the voter rolls?
Register. You have to register. So you have to register to a right. Is that an infringement?
Does the right to voting say shall not be infringed?
Oh, so this is just a semantic argument now.
No, it's not.
You believe voting rights can be infringed because it doesn't say specifically shall not be infringed.
Is it an infringement upon a 17-year-old's right to vote, since they don't have that right to vote?
No.
Oh, it's not an infringement on them?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
Because you're the one making the argument, not me. I'm saying even rights have responsibilities, and that within those responsibilities are responsibilities and order, otherwise it's chaotic. I'll go you one further. You want to ban drag show readings to children.
To minors, yes.
Why?
Why?
What are you protecting?
Why can we prohibit children from voting, those under 18 from voting?
Why are you banning?
Also that?
Is that free speech? Are you infringing on that performer's free speech?
They can continue to exercise their free speech, just not in front of a child.
Why?
Because the government does have a responsibility to protect.
I'm sorry?
The government does have a responsibility in certain instances to protect children.
What's the leading cause of death amongst children in this country? And I'm going to give you a hint. It's not drag show readings to children.
Correct, yes.
So what is it?
I'm presuming you're going to say it's firearms.
No, I'm not going to say it like it's an opinion. That's what it is. It's firearms. More than cancer, more than car accidents. And what you're telling me is you don't mind infringing free speech to protect children from this amorphous thing that you think of. But when it comes to children that have died, you don't give a flying fuck to stop that because that shall not be infringed. That is hypocrisy at its highest order.
Sure, guns are dangerous, but have you seen what Jon Stewart can do to a Republican who agrees to an interview with him? This is Jon Stewart on his Apple TV show, The Problem with Jon Stewart, and this state legislator, who should probably fire his comms director, is Oklahoma State Senator Nathan Dahm, a Republican who authored several bills loosening gun restrictions, including the nation's first anti-red flag law. He contends that these bills would protect the Second Amendment, which would invariably make us safer. And what Jon Stewart contends is that Nathan Dahm doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, just a few points here to build on what Jon Stewart said. First, Republicans have been relying on this bromide for years that more guns make us more safe. Only We've got more guns. We've got 230 million more guns than any other country on Earth. We own 42% of the world's guns. We've got more guns than Americans. And yet, you know what else we've got more of? Mass shootings. No other country has ever had more than 18 mass shootings. We've had 80 just this year as of mid-February. And in 2022, there were 647. There's not only a link between guns and mass shootings, there is a straight line. So I would reiterate what Jon said, and that is, when? When does the safety finally kick in? Because I know that Republicans keep saying more guns will equal more safety, but the actual numbers, the evidence, proves the polar opposite. Dom even comes back and abandons the whole more guns equals more safety thing and just hinges his argument on, look, you've got 400 million guns and 50,000 gun deaths, that's only a tiny fraction. And so now the argument is, well, the gun death ratio is small. First of all, a small gun death ratio is not the same as more guns make you safer at all. In fact, it actually means the total opposite, that the more guns there are, the more people who will die. Because while the proportion of gun deaths to guns might be low, the total number of people who die at the hands of guns continues to grow. Pretty amazing to watch a Republican undermine his own argument that more guns equates to more safety and instead surface the argument that says the absolute opposite. From there, Dom's argument continues to fall apart. He issues another platitude that it's not the guns, it's the people. Now, first of all, we don't have a monopoly on murderous lunatics in the United States. We're just the only country that allows those murderous lunatics to get their hands on an AR-15. But let's just grant him that argument, that it's the people. Fine. Then you would think that it's important to do background checks on those people. And yet the same Republicans who are saying, oh, it's not the guns, it's the people, are also the ones blocking any legislation surrounding expanded background checks from passing. So that we're clear, 92% of Americans favor background checks for all gun sales. 92%. You couldn't get that many people to agree what day of the week it is in Congress. And yet the reason that we don't have them is because people like this guy and his Republican colleagues refuse to vote for it, despite parading himself around and saying, we need to look out for the people, not the guns. In fact, there's a whole raft of popular legislation that increases regulations against the people while protecting the sanctity of the Second Amendment. Prohibiting people who've been determined to be a danger to themselves or others from purchasing guns polls at 86%. Allowing courts to order the confiscation of guns from people who have been determined to be a danger to themselves or others polls at 81%. A 30-day waiting period for gun sales is at 77%. All simple, common-sense solutions to ensure that we can regulate dangerous people who use guns, since apparently it is the people who are the problem and not the firearms. And yet, while Republicans surface this talking point, not a single one will support the legislation that actually backs up their talking points. All talk, zero action. And of course, when you ask these Republicans why they don't pass the very legislation that comports with their talking points of it's the people, not the guns, well, you see, that legislation would infringe on Second Amendment rights because you can't condition the right to bear arms on anything like a background check or registration, which, so that we're clear, is a made-up interpretation of the Second Amendment. And don't take it from me, according to a 2009 ruling from the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals in the case Justice versus Town of Cicero, the Second Amendment does not, quote, invalidate any and every regulation on gun use. In other words, mandatory gun registration, which was the issue at hand in that case, is still constitutional. And if the 7th Circuit wasn't enough of an authority for you, let's look at the Supreme Court, specifically two conservative justices. Antonin Scalia, arguably one of, if not the most conservative justice on the court in our lifetimes, wrote in his Heller opinion, quote, like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. Nothing in our opinion should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. William Rehnquist, the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and a Republican Reagan appointee, once wrote a memo saying that there is no, quote, serious legal obstacle to registration. All of which is to say, when this random state senator from Oklahoma suggests that registration or background checks are some infringement on the Second Amendment, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And the fact that he has no idea what he's talking about is made abundantly clear in his final point that he made to Jon Stewart, which is that registration for firearms isn't the same as registration for voting, because even though both of those are guaranteed rights in our Constitution, the Second Amendment includes the words shall not be infringed, as if that means that all other rights enumerated in the Constitution are just mere suggestions, and that in fact, the only right that's guaranteed is the right to own a gun. And so even though we have an entire Constitution, apparently all of those laws and amendments don't actually count because they don't have the added qualifier of shall not be infringed. If this argument was any more tortured, it would need to file a restraining order. The fact is that there is no legal basis and there is no moral basis for these arguments against common sense gun safety reforms. It is just naked, blind devotion to guns and gun manufacturers. They'll wrap it in these tenuous arguments about safety and children and the Constitution, but none of those arguments survive even the mildest of scrutiny. This is about Republicans' obsession with firearms and their newfound refusal to moderate their extremism. And they view the fact that 50,000 Americans die from guns every year as a price that they're clearly willing to pay. To watch the full episode of The Problem with Jon Stewart, which I'd highly recommend, click the link right here on the screen or click the link in the post description of this video, or watch The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.